What is Boris Johnson's position on Brexit? Johnson keeps saying, get Brexit done. It is oven ready. You just have to put it in the microwave and the UK can leave the EU on the 31st of January 2020. Well, nothing could be further from the truth. It will be recalled that after nearly 2 years of negotiation, Mrs. May had said hundreds of times that the UK would leave the EU by the 29th of March 2019. Remember that? But that did not happen because MPs could not agree on the deal. The EU granted an extension to the 31st of October 2019. Johnson said repeatedly that do or die, UK will leave on the 31st of October 2019. Johnson said that he would rather die in a ditch than ask the EU for an extension. Well, the UK did not leave on the 31st of October 2019 because MPs could not agree on the deal. Johnson did not die in the ditch. He had to eat humble pie and beg the EU for an extension. In a churlish and puerile act, he sent the letter to the EU begging for the extension, but did not sign the letter. Nevertheless, the EU granted an extension until 31st of January 2020. Johnson renegotiated part of the deal, which only altered the wording on the Northern Ireland question, and agreed to have the border in the Irish Sea, with confusion about where the border checks would be and how frictionless trade would operate without endangering the Good Friday Agreement. Each time Johnson explains this, it is a different explanation, which contradicts the explanation of his own Brexit secretary. Johnson said goods from Great Britain entering Northern Ireland would only be checked if they are expected to be moved onwards into the Republic of Ireland. He is wrong, and the assertion runs counter to his own withdrawal agreement. Well, the conundrum of the matter is that, according to the Good Friday Agreement, there should be no border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. Well, if you have no border between a member of the EU, which is the Republic of Ireland, and a non-EU member after Brexit, which is Northern Ireland, how do you check the flow of goods between these two countries? As an aside, how would immigration from the EU to the UK be controlled if there is no border between the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland? This deal was worse than the deal that Mrs. May had negotiated and which Johnson and his right-wing backers had refused to pass through Parliament. Johnson deliberately wanted May to fail in getting her deal passed so that Johnson could topple her and become Prime Minister. This was sheer, wanton, selfish ambition. Nevertheless, the MPs voted for the Johnson deal bill only for it to go forward for scrutiny. Don't fall for the hype that says that Parliament approved Johnson's deal. Parliament did nothing of that sort. Parliament simply voted for the deal to receive a second reading so that it could be thoroughly scrutinized. However, Johnson would not give Parliament sufficient time to scrutinize the deal and paused the bill and called a general election, having earlier prorogued Parliament unlawfully as the Supreme Court ruled. Both Jeremy Corbyn and Ken Clarke, the long-serving Tory MP, said that it might not need more than a few extra days to undertake the necessary scrutiny. Instead of taking this sensible and practical course, Johnson called the whole process to a halt. Johnson feared that his deal would unravel under scrutiny because of the deal's erosion of workers' rights, its creation of a new no-deal cliff edge in 2020, its entrenchment of a hard Brexit in law, no proper regard for climate change. All these dangers would be starkly more visible under the spotlight of the Commons' scrutiny, and the public would see through it all. So Johnson has gambled on calling an election in the hope that he would win the election and that the new MPs would back his deal. Johnson says that all the prospective Tory candidates for the election have signed up to back his deal. This begs the question, how many of these candidates have actually read the 595-page withdrawal agreement? And even more crucial, how many have actually understood it before giving the agreement to approve it? Remember Dominic Raab, when Brexit Secretary admitted at a hearing of the Parliamentary Committee that he had not even read the Good Friday Agreement. This came on top of his admission that he didn't know the part Dover played in the EU-UK trade. And remember, this was our Brexit Secretary. Johnson took the pretext to grab what he really wanted, an early election framed as a battle to get Brexit done, with him being with the people against the Remainers and Labour. So that is where we are now. Johnson certainly does not, I repeat, does not have a deal approved by Parliament. So it is not oven ready, as he keeps saying repeatedly. He is following Joseph Goebbels' teaching. Joseph Goebbels, who was appointed by Adolf Hitler to be the German Reich Minister of Propaganda on 13th March 1933, said, "If you are going to tell a lie, tell a big one. And if you tell it often enough, people will begin to believe it." The UK now has Johnson and his advisors copying Nazi tactics, one of the first steps towards the rise of fascism in the UK. What Johnson and Cummings have failed to realize is that today's young voters are very tech-savvy and are closely wired up to the various social media sites and can see a lie from a mile away. They get their news from the social media sites and are not brainwashed by the totally biased mainstream media, whose mantra now has 6 monkeys, not 3. The first 3 media monkeys are saying, "See no truth, speak no truth, hear no truth." The second 3 media monkeys are saying, "See and speak evil, speak and hear evil, hear and see evil." Johnson keeps repeating, "Get Brexit done and we can unleash the potential of the country and invest in the NHS, education, recruit new nurses and doctors, employ more police, build more hospitals." One day it is 40 new hospitals, on another day it is 6. All these things can be done without leaving the EU. And in any case, the Tories were in power for the last 10 years, so why did they not do any of these things then? Instead, they introduced austerity measures that brought untold misery to a large population. The United Nations report by Philip Alston on the impact of austerity on human rights and human beings in the UK makes for some harrowing reading. Very briefly, the report stated, close to 40% of children are predicted to be living in poverty 2 years from now. 16% of people over 65 live in relative poverty now. Millions of those who are in work are dependent upon various forms of charity to cope. Alston reported that there was an almost complete disconnect between what the ministers saw and what the public saw. The impact of austerity was obvious to anyone who opened their eyes, he said. Alston says that successive Conservative-led governments persisted with austerity and welfare cuts amid high levels of employment and a growing economy, despite evidence that large-scale poverty was persisting. British compassion has been replaced by a punitive, mean-spirited, and often callous approach, apparently designed to impose a rigid order on the lives of those least capable of coping. The report slams the government's austerity program with criticisms of shocking rises in the use of food banks and rough sleeping, falling life expectancy for some, the decimation of legal aid, the denial of benefits to the severely disabled, falling teachers' salaries in real terms, and the impoverishment of single mothers and people with mental illness. Alston said austerity had deliberately gutted local authorities, shrinking library, youth, police, and park services to the extent that it was not surprising that were unheard levels of loneliness and isolation. Thomas Hobbes observed long ago, such an approach condemns the least well-off to lives that are solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short, he said. As the British social contract slowly evaporates, Hobbes's prediction risks becoming the new reality. Johnson is now trying to distance himself from the devastating results of austerity by saying that he has been Prime Minister for only 120 days or so. However, people do remember that he has been part of this Tory government for many years. He was an MP for Henley from 2001 to 2008. Since 2015, he has been an MP for Uxbridge and South Ruislip, and Foreign Secretary from 2016 to 2018. So it is a little disingenuous to now pretend that he is not responsible for the devastation caused to people's lives by the Tory austerity measures. What is an even more galling thing is that George Osborne, the then Chancellor, who introduced these austerity measures to help bail out the bankers, has now admitted that austerity was not really necessary from an economic point of view, but was a political decision, i.e. killing off poor people to give tax breaks to the rich, which is akin to ethnic cleansing. A Tory candidate in this election is now suggesting that people using food banks can't manage their budgets properly. Another Tory candidate in this election has said that the disabled should be paid less than other workers because they do not understand money. Where are these people coming from? You can make up such arrogance, ignorance, and stupidity even if you tried. Tories have had a collective humanity, compassion, and empathy bypass and have no proposals for ending poverty or reducing inequalities. In spite of these austerity measures, the UK public sector debt was £960 billion in April 2010. However, at the end of October 2019, it had grown to £1,798 billion. Let that sink in. £1,798 billion. So where did the money go? Well, the money was given out in tax cuts for corporations and the rich. The 95% of the population suffered austerity, NHS decimation, wage freezes, etc., etc. The list is too long and too painful. It beggars belief that anyone would want to vote for Johnson and the Tories. People, especially those who are educated to a high standard, should get a moral compass and ask their consciences whether they should help the disadvantaged of the society or say, I'm all right, Jack. Each one for himself and let devil take the hindmost. Don't vote for Johnson or the Tories. Vote for Labour. Thank you. What is Boris Johnson's position on